Joining me today is Asher. Hey, Asher.
Hey, Brad, how are you?
I'm okay. So give us the brief background on yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Asher. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Tixologi. I actually come from a professional sports background. So I spent a couple years of my career with the Golden State Warriors in San Francisco, and
Wait, which position did you play?
small forward, power forward.
Was Steph? So Steph took your spot?
No, Clay took my
Oh,
spot, and
Clay took your spot.
people
Oh,
say I
okay.
look just like him too. So it's funny. I used to have that kind of
Yeah,
facial
that's right.
hair,
Yeah.
and whenever I was working the games, people would be like, "Oh, shouldn't you be down there?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" So yeah, spent a couple years there running the mobile app for them with the opening of the Chase Center. Brought the app in house, fully built from the ground up. And then before that was with the Orlando Magic. In their innovation lab. So the first innovation lab in professional sports, and worked on a wide range of projects from, player health and safety to improving the premium experience.
Yeah.
And before that, I've been a lifelong entrepreneur. I started my first business when I was 8 years old, and haven't really looked back. So now I'm leading the charge over at Tixologi.
Nice. And what is Tixology?
So Tixology is a blockchain-based ticketing software that puts event producers, teams, venues in control of their ticketing. So we work with our customers to fully integrate and customize their ticketing experience from start to finish, and we give them a lot more control over the entire ticketing experience from that purchase flow through to the secondary market and beyond. So when we talk about kind of our big value props, it's all about data capture, and knowing who the true fans are, helping our customers, drive new revenue streams through the data that's been captured, eliminating of fraudulent tickets completely, and finally a huge category around fan engagement and how we can help venues and teams engage their top fans on a much deeper level and reward them for their event behavior.
And I'm assuming that the idea for the startup came to you while you were at the NBA, at one of the two NBA games.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been a lifelong sports fan and
Yeah.
entertainment fan in general. I had a music background previously. Entertainment has always been a big part of my life. I ran an a cappella group in college.
Nice.
I've been in several musical theater performances. So that's all these things have been very core to my life, and a part of that has been going to concerts, going to sports events,
Right.
and then having a chance to work at those organizations really allowed me to kind of pull back the curtain a little bit and learn a lot more about how all the pieces of those environments work, and ticketing is obviously a huge piece of that. So started to learn more about ticketing, and boy, is it an industry with a long list of pain points. So
Yeah.
as I dug deeper into that, and started to learn more about blockchain as well, I started to connect the dots and say, there really could be something here, not just to solve a pain point in the ticketing industry, but ideally all of them. Yeah.
Right. So what's interesting to me is that um, there are several companies out there that are big, kind of dominant players in their particular sector, uh, but they're operating on 25-year-old technology, delivering a really subpar user experience for consumers in 2023. And I'm thinking about companies like Yelp, for example. Yelp is
Mhm.
Yelp. It's a 1994 company on kind of Web 1.5 kind of technology. And yet, it's the dominant player today, and nobody's been able to really kind of break through. And in your sector, it's Ticketmaster, right? That Ticketmaster is the huge gorilla in the space, and I've never heard anybody say, oh, I love Ticketmaster. Ticketmaster is an awesome experience.
Yeah.
It's one of those companies that everybody bitches and moans and complains about, and yet we're kind of forced to use.
Mhm.
So I find this kind of topic fascinating of how does a small nimble startup that could easily create a better user experience but it's still really hard to go up against the big boys. And so just tell me how you think about that.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think you hit the nail right on the head. No one's happy, either the event producers and venues or the
Right.
fans.
Right.
The only people happy are the legacy ticketing players. And so,
Right.
I think a lot of it, frankly, and this is absolutely absurd to me, when we think about, tech in general and design and building products.
Yeah.
A lot of the feedback I'm hearing from venues and event producers is that their ticketing providers aren't even listening to them or asking them what they really need or what
Uh,
they're struggling with. And so the conversations I've had over the past several months and couple years now is, what is wrong with your current ticketing? What's not working? What are you really struggling with? What could we help with? And I think that's where it has to begin, at the most base level of, let's listen to the people who are actually going to be using our product.
right.
Not an overly complicated, proposal here, but how do we start to talk about that and have that shape our roadmap? So that's one piece. But the other piece is, that these players have gotten, very comfortable with the status quo, very comfortable with how things have been, and because of the stranglehold on the market, when it comes to ticketing, especially with Ticketmaster, and obviously there's been a lot of news recently with Ticketmaster and Live Nation. The stranglehold there is an issue because the artists that are controlled by Live Nation are then playing at venues, and the venues are forced to use Ticketmaster to book those
Right.
artists, and vice
Right.
versa, right? So
Right.
there's a lot of issues there. So I think that being said, they feel comfortable in the sense that they don't have to innovate at quick speeds because they have so many people committed and locked in at
Right.
such long-term contracts. So
Right.
for us to be able to come in and say, not only can we do all that stuff, that's been there for 20 years, but here's what we're going to do to help you drive more revenue for your business. It may not be as flashy an offer up front to go with us, but in the long term, we're going to show you that there's so much more revenue here. There's so much more data capture. There's so much more security.
Right.
All these things. And if you look at it and you say, if there were no contracts in place, there really wouldn't be a big reason to not switch over to what we're doing. And if I'm being honest.
Right. Well, so Clayton Christensen, the great Harvard Business School professor,
Mhm.
wrote a book called The Innovator's Dilemma,
Yep.
which is basically about this topic, that once a company becomes the large incumbent player, they are no longer incented by wanting to listen to customers and make changes based on customer input.
Of course.
Their incentives are really just all about maintaining their market dominance. That's it.
Mhm. Exactly.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about kind of the story of your journey from what you originally envisioned Tixology to be, what you kind of learned along the way, and now what Tixology is today in terms of its focus. Based on your learnings along the way, because
Yeah.
pretty much every startup has a story like this, right?
Totally.
And
Yeah.
so
No,
tell us yours.
I love this question. It actually started with kind of something very, very relatable, I think, to most folks, is the actual ticket stub, the piece of
Yeah.
paper that you would
Yeah.
use, that you would buy, that you would get in the mail, that you would go to the box office and get, and you would
Yeah.
use to scan into the venue. And
Yeah.
depending on what the
And
show might be,
back in my day, that became a souvenir. The ticket stub became a
that's
souvenir
exactly it. That's exactly
to
where I'm
show
going.
that you were
So
at that game. Yeah.
exactly. And so, I don't think that we need to date you, because I personally also have a lot of those ticket stubs. And while they've evolved cosmetically over the years, the actual core experience of ticketing hasn't really changed. So that's something we always talk about too. When we talk about how we're pushing things forward, it's not just a cosmetic improvement or a UI change. It's an entirely new ticketing experience. So anyways, to take a step back, those ticket stubs that we all love to collect to remind us of the events we went to, whether they were a Super Bowl game or a local concert at the arena, or the concert hall down the street from us. Those are things that many people share that same story of having a
Yeah.
shoebox of them, having a
Right.
poster board that they've posted them on, whatever that may be. And so that is something that I think has always been really important and a big part of the event experience. In the shift to digital ticketing, that was completely eradicated, essentially, in the sense that your ticket now, once scanned in, disappears. And so that was something that we started to hear more and more feedback about from fans and season ticket holders, which is, how do I get a collectible stub? Can you print me off a ticket? No. The tickets are fully digital. So, that was really the spark to this idea, is how do we bring back that collectible aspect of the ticket, that stub? So it started as something as, hey, let's just have a collectible ticket. But in reality, as I got deeper and deeper down this blockchain rabbit hole, I brought on a co-founder. We talked more and more about it. We learned about the space. We realized that blockchain tech has the power to solve many more pain points in the ticketing industry than just the people missing a collectible ticket. So while that's something we offer today, we pivoted very, very early on from just collectible ticket add-ons to a fully fledged blockchain-based ticketing software. That's how I'd like to define, kind of our journey so far.
And who's your sweet spot customer right now?
So right now, as we know we need to work up to the
Yeah,
major levels. And so
yeah,
right now we see, good targets for us as small, medium-sized venues, event
got it.
producers, and
Yeah,
lower level sports organizations,
right,
where they're not locked into long-term deals with Ticketmaster, SeatGeek, whoever it may be. And a lot of them are using platforms that frankly don't have that much functionality, or aren't innovating either at the speed they need to be,
right,
and certainly don't have the functionality around controlling the resale market and engaging with their fans through the ticket and the collectible aspect of the ticket and the data
right.
capture. A lot of these things just aren't being used, or aren't out there for a lot of the people we're going after.
And the really small event producers are probably using something like Eventbrite. Can you
Exactly.
could you target them as well, or are they too down market for you?
Yeah, so that's another thing we've learned, and we're this continues to be something that we discuss internally and evolve, but we're actually building out a secondary offering that's going to kind of go after that smaller event producer that
Yeah,
maybe is on Eventbrite today, but is looking for more than Eventbrite can really offer them, but they're
right,
not quite ready to sign a big long-term enterprise level ticketing agreement. And so
sure,
we feel like there's a interesting part of the market there, that we can kind of play into as well, and hopefully help event producers and venues, as they grow throughout their journey, right, as they evolve from a smaller organization into a massive one.
right, right. So along your journey from idea through today, uh, there, I'm sure, like always, it's been a kind of a roller coaster where there's been some days when you thought to yourself, "Oh shit, this is never going to work," and and other days where you're like, "Holy shit, this is working." Uh, are there any kind of moments that you could tell us about that are kind of stuck in your mind in terms of being kind of moments of insight?
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't have hit the nail on the head more. It most certainly is a roller coaster, and I think
Yeah,
as many times as that's said, as cliched as it may sound, it couldn't be more accurate.
yeah,
And not just across months or weeks. Within a day, you could be from the highest of highs to the
right,
lowest of lows.
right,
So I think about moments where we're getting all this rejection from venture capitalists when we're going out, and
right.
then one day going to a breakfast and landing, three quarters of the round that we sent out to raise in a 40-minute meeting, right? So
Right,
these
right.
are the types of things that are not uncommon in this startup world. And so I think
Yeah,
about that. I think about this journey to build our product, and how we had days where how could we miss this piece, and then we have other days where we're like, wow, this is something we've figured out that no one else has figured out. So it happens across investment and fundraising. It happens in sales. It happens in hiring, right? Missing out on a hire that you
Yep.
really wanted, or that you really needed. The one thing I've learned about the roller coaster is it always evens back out at some
Yep.
point. It might take a couple days, it might take a couple weeks, but you better strap in and hold on for the ride, because the people that don't strap in are thrown off, and they let those curves get the best of them, if that makes sense. So
Right.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. So sports metaphors can be a little dicey, but I definitely think that being an entrepreneur is a lot like being an athlete, in the sense that being able to keep that even keeled attitude day in and day out ends up being really important.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
it's an interesting comparison. The only caveat I would make is athletes usually get a night off or a break.
yeah. Right.
Startup
Right.
founders and C-suite level at startup,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Yeah.
you're always on. There's
You're
no
always on.
there's no
That's right. Yeah.
defined innings or periods or whatever.
Right. Right.
It's a constant game.
Right. Right. I always say the nice thing about running your own business is you can work any 7 days a week you want.
Exactly.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you touched on capital raising, and so tell us about that. How's your, you know, how did you find the capital raising process, etc.
Yeah. So I took a bit of a crazy leap, at the end of last summer. So not this previous summer, but the summer before. I was at the Warriors at the time. I knew that if I wanted to turn this into a real business and start to have customer conversations and investor conversations, I had to step away. And so I
Mhm.
jumped. No
Yeah.
funding, a little bit of savings I had from my time, and frankly, I hoped it would work out, but I never really knew. And so as we got into the process, I started in kind of late November. I started thinking about fundraising, and very luckily, by the beginning of January, I had the initial part of the round closed. So which was the big kind of 1.5 million check from our lead investor. So I like to thank a couple things. I like to thank the market conditions at the time. I
Yes.
like
Yeah.
to I like to think I like to thank kind of the Web3 growth and what was going on in the space that
Right.
we were building in.
Right.
Obviously, those factors certainly played into the fundraising journey, and created something. We have one advisor who spent most of his career operating, and then on the venture capital side, he never saw a deal come together so quickly. And so, not to like brag, but I think that's
Yeah.
something that I know will never come as easily to us again.
Right.
But beyond those kind of factors that were out of our control and that happened to be right place, right time, I think the other things that were really, really powerful, I think it's important for other founders too. One is just an incredible deck, and I continue to vouch for this, not just for fundraising, but just in general. I never could ever imagine how important building PowerPoints or slides could be all those years in high school or college. But I feel like that's one of the most important things that a founder or CEO can be good at today, is
Mm.
telling a story through
Yeah.
slides and through a
Yeah.
deck. And so we were able to do that really well. We brought on some design help that made it look really flashy, and I practice and practice and practice. I refined it. I think the deck was really, really big for us. I think the fact that our team, my co-founder and myself, my co-founder, with a web and app development firm, a ton of product knowledge, myself with the sports background and entertainment background playing in this
Right.
space. I think that core team was super important. And then I think just, relentlessly networking. I think that's, something
Yeah.
that always comes up as one of my biggest skills. And I hone that. You know what I mean? I own that, and I hone that. Like that's a big part of everything I do with this business, whether it's fundraising, sales, hiring. I lean into my network. I always am continuing to grow my network. I go to an event, I meet people, I follow up with them, I meet more people through them, I follow up with them. And what starts to happen, you'll realize it if you do it, is those people connect you to other people who connect you to other people. And eventually one of those people turns into an investor or an advisor or a colleague, whatever that may be. And so I think those three things, in addition to the market condition, were super important for us.
Yeah, so what you just described maps 100% to my own personal experience. My Stanford students often say, how do I meet an investor? How do I meet a VC? And the reality is that I raised a fair amount of capital in my career, and I think every investor I've ever had is somebody I either knew socially or was introduced to me by somebody I knew socially.
Yep.
Right. And
Exactly.
so as you said, that's just kind of how it happens. It happens from personal network.
Yep.
And you can bitch and moan about whether that's fair or not, but the reality is that's how it happens.
And everyone, I'm a strong believer that everyone has the power to improve their network and to
100%.
build those connections, right? It
100%.
takes time, it takes energy, it takes patience, it takes listening, all those kind of things. And then when they do hit, when those intros do come through, be ready, right? Have that deck, research the firm,
right.
Do everything you can to be as ready as possible for those conversations, because as a VC, hearing hundreds of pitches every week, even you need to stand out so quickly. It's like even with the deck itself, right? I always tell founders, please use DocSend or something like that when you go out and start raising, because it gives so much clarity into what's actually getting people's attention and what investors are spending time with on your deck. And you can see really quickly, even in it with ours, which was a successful fundraise, I think the average time spent on the deck was still under 3 minutes for, I believe, 20 slides, something around that. So that just shows you how quick you need to capture and get the point across. So I always reiterate that too.
Yep. And let me say that while you were giving a lot of credit to the slides, you're saying that you had great slides, you had great designer, terrific deck. The reality, of course, that investors aren't investing in a slide deck; they're investing in the founders. So your ability to tell the story was what mattered, right? And that I'm just saying that you're probably giving too much credit to the slides because
of course,
it's the person delivering the slides that is what matters.
Yeah.
And
the other thing, if you don't mind me saying, because I
please.
think this is another piece of learning for me throughout the fundraising process, is as a founder, do not get too excited after a call with an investor because it is always, and it probably always will be, impossible to know how interested an investor actually is. You'll come out of one call where they're nodding their head and asking incredible questions, and you'll get an email 5 days later saying they're not interested. Or you'll go into one where they're kind of brushing you off, or they're, answering emails or whatever it may be, and they'll want to have a second round. So these are the types of things that, I think are really important in this process, because I think it can be really discouraging and really demotivating if you try and predict what's going to happen with a specific investor, because frankly, no one knows. And that's the other thing. I read an article recently, and I've learned this myself, is that venture capitalists, that's their job to be nice to founders, to get to meet founders, to meet as many founders as possible, to ask interesting questions about their story. If they're not doing that, they're not very good investors. But does it mean they're going to invest in you? No. So always be cognizant of that too, right?
Right. I always say that investors like to say maybe, because if they say maybe, then they can keep you on the line. They continue to learn from you. They can continue to kind of learn about the space that maybe someday they might want to invest in. But for you as an entrepreneur, you don't want a maybe. You don't know what to do with a maybe. You want either a yes or a no, and move on.
Yeah, and if one of those big investors does bite, then guess who else? Guess who's now circling all the maybes, right?
Yes,
so
yes.
It's always a game in that way too, right?
And also, this speaks to your earlier comment about how being an entrepreneur is a roller coaster, and so you don't want to ever get too high or too low.
Hmm.
So in terms of fundraising, don't have one good meeting with a investor and think to yourself, "Oh, this is a done deal."
Exactly.
And also, don't have a bad meeting with an investor and go around moping about
Yep.
it,
Yep. Hmm.
um, because as you said, it's easy to have a good investor meeting, but it's a long path from that to a signed term sheet.
Yep. Exactly.
And then it's another path from a signed term sheet to a closed deal.
That's the other thing. I learned that over the holidays
Right?
last another example of the never-ending roller coaster is negotiating that kind of thing over several weeks of what are normally holidays.
Right. Right.
Right.
So what's next for Tixology? What's the next big milestone you're working toward?
Yeah, so for us, we're super excited. We launched officially kind of the beginning of December with a event at Art Basel, Miami, and
Cool.
then the week after that, I was in New York onboarding our first customer, which is a immersive ice cream experience called Catchin' Ice Cream. It's this
Nice.
ice cream influencer with 13 million TikTok followers that opened a store in Soho. So we're live with them today. Check that out if you're in New York for sure, and you can see our tech in action. But from here, we continue to build out our product and innovate. We've got lots of exciting sales opportunities in the pipeline from professional sports organizations and leagues, even to music and entertainment opportunities. So continuing to hit home on that, and then also we have something coming in the pipeline, a second offering that I look forward to sharing more about soon. So
Can you can
yeah.
you give us a hint?
Well, so it goes back to this idea of that segment of the market that is kind of underserved today, and this Eventbrite on steroids, so to speak. So I'll
Nice.
leave it
All
there.
right.
Yeah.
Can't wait. Can't wait. All right, Asher, I'll let you get back to your busy life running a company. But last question: uh, advice for other entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I think, we went through a lot of it today. I think the biggest thing that I love to talk about, is anyone can be a CEO. And I know you're a big believer in this too, Brett. Anyone can be a CEO, as long as you're ready for that, for what that entails. And I can't explain to you what that entails until you're in it yourself. But if you feel drawn to that and you feel like it might be something for you, I could only encourage you to go for it. And remember, on that roller coaster of a startup, remember to stay strapped in because you're making it to the end if you can do that. So that's probably how I'd leave it.
On that roller coaster ride of the startup, remember to stay strapped in. It's like good advice. Thanks, Asher. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Brett. Appreciate it.